Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to part two of Silver Cloud's Hello Helpdesk Dayforce Snag list. As I say, this is part two, so hopefully you joined us for part one, and now you're back for more. My name's Will. For those who don't know, I'm the account executive here at Silver Cloud. I've been here nearly 3 years, and I've worked closely with our Dayforce practice in that time, where we've supported clients to implement, optimize, and manage Dayforce. And I'm joined today by Vicky.
Hello, Helpdesk. This is Vicky here. I am one of the Dayforce implementation specialists here at Silver Cloud. I've worked with a number of clients over the past almost 3 years now at Silver Cloud across different modules for Dayforce, including core, WFM, and more of a specialism on the talent modules, actually. Prior to joining Silver Cloud, I was on the client side as part of an HR team, working on remedial work on an EU-based company that had previously implemented Dayforce and required a number of addressing some of their challenges and issues that they faced. I'm very excited to be here today.
Thanks, Vicky. So just to recap, today is part two. We're covering the next 5 topics in our Dayforce snag list. So Vicky and I put our heads together and went out to Silver Cloud's wider Dayforce practice, and we spoke about, across the last 5 years that we've been a Dayforce implementation partner, what are the common themes and topics, if we were to put a top 10 together, that we feel would be worthwhile covering and explaining. Some best practice, tips, guidance, some things that maybe you haven't considered or weren't aware are available in Dayforce. So whether you are currently implementing, you might have recently gone live with Dayforce, you may have been live for a while but are looking to continue to maximize its optimization, or you may even be considering Dayforce as your next HRIS. I hope there's something for you today. So without further ado, we'll get into our first topic. So what Vicky and I are going to cover to begin with is reporting and analytics. So looking at the capabilities and the functionality within Dayforce. Naturally, reporting and analytics is a crucial part of any HRIS system. What I'd like to start by covering before Vicky delves into some of the features that Dayforce has, I think it's important to start on this topic by looking at the data that you're putting into your Dayforce platform. So this actually starts right at the implementation, which might be valid for some people listening in. So you need to assess the data that you are taking out of your incumbent systems and putting into Dayforce. So it's that old adage of put rubbish in, get rubbish out. So when you're extracting that data, what we feel is best practice is to really thoroughly assess and process map which data and why you're taking that out of your existing systems. It's also a good opportunity to cleanse that data. So often, especially if you've been live with your previous platform for a long time, there's going to be irrelevant data, outdated or just incorrect data that's remaining in that platform. You're also going to have a lot of historical data. So do you need to have all of that coming across and putting that into your new platform? So I think that's certainly the first step, Vicky. I'm sure you would agree before you start looking at the dashboards and reporting in Dayforce.
Yes, it's all about the data cleanliness. We use that phrase often, rubbish in, rubbish out, as you say, Will. And it's important even just for those that have gone live. Any of the data that you're adding in terms of the employee record, any types of information that you're mass importing to the system, it's critical that you get it right. Otherwise, any type of analytics, as many of us know, may not be the most accurate picture if you're making data-driven decisions afterwards. What we would recommend is for those that are kind of at the stage of being live for maybe a little while in Dayforce, we would recommend for you to take a look at your data auditing approach. Now, there are recommended standard reports that are available for data audit purposes in Dayforce. I'm quite aware that payroll commonly uses some of these data audit reports whenever they run payroll, but there are other types of data audit reports like personal data, checking in employee information, and other types of WFM reports like time clocking, ensuring that you're reviewing everyone's punches periodically to look for anomalies. All these data reports are available as standard standard. Certainly you can modify them, but there is certainly a long list that's available through the Dayforce community portal, which users can then access and pick and choose which audit reports they like to generate. You can also schedule the data audits as well, reports through the system, but we would recommend for those on the call today to think of more of a wider approach in terms of outside the system. Do you have a calendar of every quarter you're conducting these set of audits throughout the system, or perhaps annually if there's a security role audit that you would like to conduct, ensure that you're scheduling and you have a proper plan for this across the systems team. We also want to recommend as well that for reporting purposes, it's very common during implementation that you may have one or two reporting champions that are identified as the go-to people in your organization for modifying reports, being the kind of expert in putting together some of these a little bit more complex reports. Our recommendation is to increase this and maybe introduce some additional reporting champions outside of HR. So you may have a finance reporting champion that really understands your GL, the cost centers, how the different work assignments are split, or potentially other areas of your org are split. You could also have a reporting champion more to do so with integrations. So they really understand the different API fields and what types of export and inbound reports that you'd like to use with your integrations connectors. And of course, the payroll reporting champions I mentioned earlier. It is recommended for best practice to have a master document which identifies which Dayforce entity and the field descriptions that you're using very commonly across different types of reports. An example I can give is that you, from an HR perspective, perhaps you're looking to generate a report to calculate the absenteeism rate across various departments or different locations in your organization. So from an HR perspective, we may have different labels or terminology from what we're trying to extract from the system. However, you may still need to connect with payroll to really understand the different pay codes, whether it's a paid absence, an unauthorized absence, and how that affects your absenteeism report. So it's critical that you do have this master document that you're constantly updating, especially as well if the knowledge moves on from different people or those reporting champions may not be at the organization, have moved on to different parts of the organization. You at least have this master document that you can refer to troubleshoot and look back in regards to what types of fields you're pulling in these reports.
Yeah, I think there's two takeaways for me that I certainly hear talking to clients about Dayforce is the master document and the multiple champions. I think it's a crucial part of the platform, and it is a risk if that there's a bottleneck. Sometimes that just sits in HR, or it might just sit with one person within HR that has that knowledge. It isn't documented. There aren't multiple people with the skill set or made champions of that. So some good points there. Could you talk to us a bit about the learnings that are available for reporting, how people can upskill themselves in the platform?
Yes, so the Dayforce Learning Center, formerly called the CEC, but it's been changed to the Dayforce Training Portal now, does contain a number of excellent courses for those users that are looking to upskill themselves on how to modify some of the fixed format reports in Dayforce. So there is an instructor-led training course titled that, Using Fixed Format Reports in Dayforce. And we would recommend any users that would like to start learning how to modify reports, pulling in different types of fields, as well as potentially creating, for example, a pivot table embedded in your Dayforce report. That is all possible through the fixed formatting reports. As well, for those that are looking for a little bit more advanced training in order to then create your own custom reports, there are a handful of courses available through the Dayforce training portal, specifically related to the report designer. There's a part 1 and 2. There's also a course specifically related for creating custom fields using SQL, and as well as some other advanced reporting courses available for those reporting champions that are familiar already with the fixed format reports and would like to start building your own reports utilizing what's available in the system. I would like to also mention, for those that weren't aware, Dayforce does have a Dayforce Report Marketplace. And once this is enabled for your role, the Dayforce Report Marketplace contains a curated library of reports that are built by Dayforce reporting experts. So you can certainly find the reports, filter, preview, edit, modify as you see fit for your purposes. But it's a really good base. If you haven't already taken a look at some of the Dayforce Report Marketplace reports, I'd highly recommend for those advise users on the call to take a peek and see if there's anything there that you may be currently struggling with to build a report, and it's already available for you and already pre-built. Just a heads up that the Dayforce Report Marketplace is available with any users that have access to reporting and analytics. So it isn't an add-on. You should be able to retrieve the reports through the marketplace once you have the role features enabled for your particular role.
And I think just to clarify, because Marketplace, we was talking about this yesterday, makes it sound like there's some sort of back alley trading, selling of reports or dashboards, but it's a free resource, right, that's available in the platform. I think it's certainly best practice to assign your champions and go through this training. A lot of the standard reports or the reports in the marketplace are fine for organizations. They cover what they need, or maybe you just need to tweak slightly rather than building a completely customized report. But there's complexities and there's unique things in every organization that you may feel needs a customized report. So yeah, I think that's something to bear in mind as well. But yeah, the marketplace I know is a good shout and is popular. So we've covered a bit about reporting. Could you talk to us a bit about dashboards, how we use those reports in Dayforce?
Yeah, so there's two ways that you can use the dashboard functionality in Dayforce. The first one is if you would like to create your own dashboards by pulling in the data from Dayforce into a separate analytical tool. So Power BI or Excel are very common tools for organizations to then perform your own analysis or modeling outside the Dayforce system. So this can be enabled through setting up an analytics data connector. Through this separate role, it allows the APIs to then access your Dayforce data for a immediate connection into your external Power BI platforms. You do need a Power BI license though, however, of course, but this will enable you to support a high volume of data imports and exports between Power BI and Dayforce itself. For those that have access to Dashboard Pro in Dayforce, if you're unsure, I would recommend just double checking your licensing for access. Dashboard Pro provides visibility into about 19 pre-built dashboards that are already built by Dayforce to allow organizations to assess long-term trends, different types of KPIs and metrics that you may be considering at a high level. You can certainly share these dashboards to senior leadership team members or particular line managers if you would like them, for example, to see the turnover rate. So this is possible through the Dashboards Pro feature, and it allows users to be able to easily modify those pre-built dashboards or even build your own dashboards through the Dayforce interface without a separate Power BI license. So essentially, it's already pre-built into Dayforce through the Dashboard Pro feature. So users can certainly share those visualizations through various methods. One of them is sharing some of these visualizations through the Advanced Experience Hub. So for those organizations that do have the Advanced Experience Hub on the homepage, you can display a small widget for Hub audience members to see a quick glance of certain KPIs, like turnover I mentioned, or a particular absenteeism rate as well. And these little widgets in the Advanced Experience Hub are updated periodically on the homepage. So whenever the managers log in, they'll have an updated dashboard for them to see right on the homepage.
Thanks, Vicky. Yeah, I think to that point there, so Dashboard Pro, you just need to check your licensing. Some organizations, dashboards meets their requirements, but it's certainly something you can talk to Dayforce about if you feel like some of the things that Vicky mentioned there with Dashboard Pro would be useful for you. So covered point one, so dashboards and reporting. The next thing we'd like to cover today is a bit around the talent modules. So if you watch the first session, it's not something we've touched upon too much. I think it's safe to say that Dayforce, often the focus is on HR pay and time, certainly as a phase one when you're implementing the system, and often Dayforce is attracting large complex organizations that need it for those functionalities that they require for HR pay and time. But actually, I think the talent modules have come a long way and there's a lot of great functionality there. I know this is something that's close to Vicky's heart. So one of Vicky's previous roles at SilverCloud was to implement the talent modules. So we felt it was worth just giving an overview of perhaps the common ones, the functionality. I'll hand over to you.
Yes, well, so some organizations have a large number in their tech stack. They have Dayforce, they have other applicant tracking systems, they have maybe an engagement survey vendor that they're also sending out for anonymous feedback for employee NPS scores, for example. So Dayforce does offer a number of what we call talent modules. And just to be clear, the Dayforce talent modules includes performance management. We have the recruiting ATS, applicant tracking system, the compensation management module as well, in addition to the engagement survey, succession planning, and the embedded learning module. So there's about 6 talent modules currently in place. Not to say there won't be any future ones as well, but at the moment, those 6 are the key talent modules that we sometimes hear that are underutilized. So for example, some organizations, as I mentioned, have an external engagement survey vendor that they might be using. But with Dayforce, you have a single platform, unified database. So instead of having an HR team member having to extract all of the data that you would like to use for your engagement survey, so who are we targeting for this survey? Who are their participants? Who are their managers for reporting after the engagement is done? What you can utilize is the Dayforce engagement survey module, which would help save a lot of time in terms of setting up that survey. One of the recent clients that I've been working with for the engagement survey noticed a significant number of time savings just to introduce the engagement survey. So instead of having to extract 3 or 4 different reports from Dayforce and then having to import that data after you've cleaned it and separated and categorized everything into the external engagement survey platform, this is all housed into Dayforce, which means that in the engagement survey, there are dozens of different eligibility qualifiers that you can use that are already existing in your Dayforce org structure. So you can target specific locations that you would like to send the survey out to. You can send out surveys based on particular management groups. You can create your own groups as well through HR admin, in addition to various different criteria. For example, if you have a onboarding engagement survey that you would like to configure and send out to all your new joiners, just to ask them what they thought about your onboarding process, if there's any feedback that they like to provide anonymously. Dayforce engagement survey does have a very quick way for you to automatically launch surveys based on a rolling hire date. So it doesn't require manual intervention or any HR team member having to then manually go into the external engagement survey platform and start triggering new surveys. The Dayforce engagement survey automatically captures everyone's hire date. So then you can set when you would like that onboarding survey to be sent out. Just a heads up, the implementation for the engagement survey is short and sweet, I like to call it. It's a quick 3 to 5 session guided implementation session with a Dayforce implementation consultant. And it's a very quick win for those organizations that are trying to streamline some of their talent modules and get some quick wins across the system. So as you said, Will, after phase 1 is done, say core, time and attendance, and payroll are in a very steady state, we would recommend those systems teams and HR teams to now reevaluate whether it's time for you to introduce some of these talent modules as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we often see HR payroll as the driver for the project. So there's perhaps an upcoming renewal with your existing provider, and that's what's led you to go to selection and perhaps choose Dayforce. And those talent modules may be with other providers, and there might be scattered renewals that don't align to that phase 1. So I think, as you've touched upon, the talent modules have come a long way. I know they're an area of focus for Dayforce to continually improve. So it's certainly something to bear in mind. I think perhaps as your renewals for those additional areas come up, to revisit Dayforce and look at the functionality and the benefits, as you say, of having that all-in-one platform. So let's move on to our third point. What we now wanted to talk about was planning your upcoming release strategies. So this is the releases that Dayforce will have throughout the year for your platform. Vicky and I have spoke to clients recently who, you're busy, right? You're doing your day jobs, and the releases probably come around very quickly in your mind. So about having a plan to prepare and execute those releases that you'll have in the system is something we feel is particularly prevalent. One thing I just wanted to start with was just going over the different types of releases and how frequent they will be from Dayforce. So there's 3 types of releases. First is the major product releases that you'll have in the first and third quarters of each year. So these are separate dates for the major upgrades on the desktop and mobile. The desktop and mobile functionality sometimes isn't released at the same time. Often it will be desktop first and then it will subsequently be rolled out to the mobile. But these are the two major releases each year that certainly will require some manual intervention from the clients. Secondly, you'll have minor releases which run parallel, so they'll be on the second and fourth quarter of each year. And then you, of course, have your general software patches, fixes, bugs, or any critical or internal issues, and they are released every 3 weeks within the platform. Vicky, can you talk us through how organizations plan for these and also the type of materials that Dayforce will provide in advance of these upgrades?
Thanks. Well, yes, there's a significant number of materials that are written by Dayforce, published by Dayforce in advance of these major release changes. You'll hear a lot during this webinar about the Dayforce community, but significant number of these resources are available and pushed through the community portal. What our recommendation would be for each major release, and even some of the minor releases, is to be prepared. You do need to plan with the wider SMEs across your organization. You need to test all of these upgrades in the test environment to ensure that there's no significant impacts toward payroll or other areas of the system that you weren't anticipating. And it really gives you a way for you to then become more familiar with the upgrades before they're released to your production environment. Then we have the process of what I call refine and repeat, the R&R. So each time there's a major release, you'll have learnings internally between, the process, the different types of features that are being released, who should be involved, which types of stakeholders should be helping you with testing. So there is a component of continuously refining this process for major releases, and then you'll repeat the cycle every first and third quarter, as Will had mentioned. So this is what we call the structured approach to each major release cycle, and it does require some dedicated time from your systems team to be able to properly plan and test and execute before the release hits your production environment. So just an example of some of the critical resources that are available for you in the Dayforce community portal. Prior to every major release, there is what we call a new release readiness resource, and that includes detailed files and descriptions on what types of features are being updated per module. Dayforce also releases sample readiness plans and even sample upgrade test cases available for you to then start and modify for your own purposes. As well, Dayforce does launch a number of release webinars, and these are online webinars that users can join to understand a little bit better what the additional upgrades are, what types of features are being amended, and any tips and tricks that the Dayforce team would like for you to know. If you can't attend the release webinars live, that's okay. You can watch the recordings as well. They're usually published pretty quickly after the live sessions, since Dayforce knows that a number of users are relying on these release webinars and to be able to watch them as well. So our recommendation is take advantage of all of these resources that are available and make sure that you are testing and retesting and running through a number of different test scenarios in your test environment when it's available for you. Usually the test environments will be upgraded several weeks before your production upgrade. You will need to just double check with your Dayforce CSM or AE just to confirm exactly when your test environment will be updated, but that will then allow you the ability to test through a number of different features that are being upgraded. So one thing to keep in mind when it comes to timing of major upgrades, you do need to consider sometimes the downtime impact. So you should ideally schedule your upgrade maybe when there's less users across the system. So it could be maybe a particular area in the evenings or earlier in the mornings for this particular major upgrade to take place. And as you mentioned, Will, for those organizations that are heavy users of the mobile app, you will need to repeat some of these test scenarios on the mobile app in addition to the desktop app. So repeat those activities for both, just ensure that you have a good understanding of the impact of these major upgrades.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the timing one is crucial. And it's also about assessing how your employees use the platform. So as you say, splitting out that the mobile and the desktop will be separate. For example, desktop workers often using the desktop, but other organizations, I'm sure 95% of the time, it'll be the mobile app that's being utilized. And I think the manual intervention is a good one, just to reiterate. I think sometimes there's a misconception that you see the communications about an update in Dayforce and that might just be automatic. But I think, to your point, Vicky, to reiterate that certainly for the major updates, almost always there is some manual intervention that's needed by you, the client, to execute that. Could you talk to us a little bit about sort of change management, communicating these updates to your employees in an organization?
Yes. So when it comes to change management, a number of system teams would have already handled change management through the phase one implementation go live. But we recommend, in terms of the major releases, that the principles are the same. So over communicate, notify your users ahead of time what the changes are. You can put together a quick 1 or 2 pager for your managers just to let them know potentially some of their features might look different or might be slightly different than what they're used to before, especially if there's any changes to, say, entitlement policies or timesheets entries, for example, or even any of the other talent modules that we mentioned earlier. Sometimes these major releases do impact how you process things in Dayforce. So it's better to over communicate to your end users what those changes will be. And of course, make sure you're retraining them when it comes to the new features, especially if there's a departure into how they're used to doing things. So change management principles still apply here. That doesn't stop after phase one. Even for major releases, you're still continuing to manage your end users and ensure that they're utilizing the system effectively for adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. Some good points there. Perhaps if we look at a real life example of a major update that's coming into play. So, Vicky, can you talk us through some examples of employment legislation changes coming into effect this year that will impact Dayforce platform?
Yes, so in the UK, there's been this month specifically, there's been numerous tax thresholds and rate changes and updates that will be pushed out through your latest released in 2025 for Dayforce. One example you want to bring up is just the UK national living wage, for example. So the rate changes were effective last week on April 1st. So this is a reminder to those on the call. Have you reviewed your minimum wage setup for in Dayforce for both your WFM module and payroll areas of the system? So for example, Dayforce will automatically update the minimum wage rate for hourly employees or those employees that this rate will impact. But you, as the systems team and the client, should be testing some of these changes when it comes to your pay policy rules. So if you have some premiums or pay policy rules that add on multipliers or top ups on top of this base wage, you should test this out in your test environment to ensure that there's no major discrepancies and to ensure that the payroll calculations are running correctly. Because the last thing you want is for the minimum wage increase to take place on the employee record side, but then you don't see this reflected in the timesheets or pay rates on the payroll side. Another area that you could consider is to ensure testing payroll statutory sick pay, so SSP calculations, especially if you have a company sick pay that's applied on top of the base rate. Again, just double check that you are testing this thoroughly to ensure that any changes are impacting both WFM and payroll and what you expect the system to behave. One last thing that I would suggest as well is we talked a bit about compensation module a bit earlier on talent. But if you're an organization in the middle of your Q1 compensation cycle, for example, and you are applying retroactive merit increases for January 1st, this is again something that you should test in your test environment to ensure that once you post the compensation cycle, it runs in parallel with what you expect in the employee settings screen and as well that the payroll calculations are impacted correctly. So this is again something that you want to run in parallel. You could have a parallel compensation cycle in production and another one in your test environment, just to ensure that the new releases are behaving the way as you expect.
Great. Thank you, Vicky. Yeah, some good ones there, I think, to keep an eye out for some real life examples that I know have been quite hot topics in the industry over the last few months. So if we move on to our fourth point now, and I'm going to hand back to you here, but we're looking at the community resources that are available in the Dayforce community.
Yeah, so I touched upon the Dayforce community portal a few times earlier in the meeting today, Will, but that is really the ecosystem for all things Dayforce. It's where I personally start. If I need a bit more information about a certain feature, or if I'm troubleshooting, there may be already an existing knowledge article available in the Dayforce community portal that outlines exactly what the root cause is and any investigation and troubleshooting steps you should follow. So last I checked, there were about 2,700 knowledge articles in the Dayforce community. As of yesterday, there might be a bit more even from today after publishing things to get ready for this major release this month. So, for example, if you're looking for mass import templates for data changes and you'd like to do a front-end import, there may be an existing import template already available for you in the Dayforce community, so you don't need to start from scratch. I mentioned the troubleshooting fixes a bit earlier. There's a lot of FAQs and different articles on entitlements, for example. There's dozens of articles specifically related to the different types of entitlements and your balances. I know that's sometimes confusing for some of system users having to configure a new balance award or balance grant for a new policy, for example. If you're looking for a summary on Dashboards Pro, it's available through the Dayforce community portal, as I mentioned. So if there are any queries, it's likely that there's an existing article that's already there in the Dayforce community. So that's really my go-to as my number one resource when it comes to available articles or keyword searches that you can look up as my number one. So even though some systems teams and organizations may have initially started with one or two users having access to the Dayforce community, some of you may not know that you can actually have an unlimited amount of team members when it comes to accessing the Dayforce community. So if you have a finance person that would like additional information on how to build a report or some of the Dayforce guides on the Dashboard Pro, you can give them access to the Dayforce community itself, so that person can then go ahead and do their own searches, conduct their own learnings through the Dayforce Community Center articles. So we would recommend, if you would like additional access, there's a form that you can submit through the Dayforce community, and then you can grant additional team members access to this valuable resource. One other resource that we would recommend, aside from the Dayforce implementation guide, so I know that's kind of the help.dayforce.com that many of us are familiar with. One other resource that sometimes is underutilized or overlooked is the AHA portal. So this is where Dayforce users can submit ideas or feature recommendations or anything that you would think that would be beneficial for Dayforce to start including in the roadmap, or for their R&D teams to then consider introducing this feature. So that is an area that I highly recommend you also take a look at and submit any types of feedback in terms of new features that you'd like to see through the AHA portal. So Will, you've been in the Dayforce ecosystem for a number of years now. In your experience, what other recommendations would you suggest for clients that want to stay a little bit more involved beyond reviewing some of the available resources to them?
Yeah, I think that there's a fantastic community out there of Dayforce users. I'm a big believer that the networking events are really well put together and very valuable. And I think the overwhelming feedback you get at these events is positive. I'd absolutely recommend you can just Google Dayforce events, Dayforce EMEA events, Dayforce US events, wherever you're based. I mean, to give you some examples, there's a virtual summit on the 17th of April. There tends to be quarterly in-person meetups around the world. The next one in EMEA is the EMEA Summit in London, which is on the 14th of May. As I say, it's generally a quarterly event. They're so worthwhile. I think if you imagine there's 200-300 organizations all in the same building, you're all in the same position, you're all Dayforce users. There's breakout sessions. Silver Cloud actually have a breakout session on the 14th of May. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. I'll be there. I'm sure Vicky will be as well. I don't think we're hosting it, the breakout session. I haven't been told we are yet, but Silver Cloud are hosting a session there. But yeah, I think beyond the material and the breakout sessions, there's talk about roadmap, there's product updates, you get a short demo. And then I do truly think the networking afterwards, I think, as I say, being in a room with 200-300 people that are all Dayforce users, there's bound to be organizations that are going through similar growth trajectories that you may be, or looking to roll out the platform to other locations or functionality, similar industries to yourself. I see similar faces come to most events, which is great, and new faces as well that start to build relationships with other organizations in a similar position. So yeah, definitely mark those in your calendar, and if you can attend, do so. There's also a great network of LinkedIn communities. Some of these are selective. You have to apply and, I guess, sort of state your case as to, your background, a Dayforce user, etc. But a lot of these are actually managed outside of Dayforce themselves. They're not regulated by Dayforce. These are essentially super user groups that come together. Again, you might spend half an hour looking for the right place to do something or searching the learning materials. In my experience, you put a one line question into one of these communities, you probably get 10 answers from people that have done what you're looking to do within the last 12 months. So they're certainly invaluable as well. And then I would say utilizing the wider Dayforce partner network and their materials. So Silver Cloud, we've been an implementation partner for 5 years now for Dayforce. We have a dedicated Dayforce page on our website. Hello Helpdesk has been going for a while now. We've got a number of sessions recorded, case studies, white pages, best practice, you name it. I think sometimes coming from a different perspective where it's not coming directly from Dayforce, but it's coming from an organization like Silver Cloud, who for 15 years have been a whole of market HR tech consultancy. We try and come at these sorts of things with general best practice that applies to Dayforce and isn't just specific to Dayforce. So yeah, I'd say look for the events, look for the other materials outside of what's available in Dayforce itself as well, would be my advice.
Great. Thanks, Will. Yes, hopefully we'll see a few of you at the London event. Otherwise, maybe in future community events, we'll certainly meet some of our audience members as well. The last point of our Hello Help Desk session today is just general long-term best practices when it comes to your Dayforce platform. From myself, I do come from an HR operations background, as I mentioned previously, part of an HR team. One thing that we typically put together on the HR team would be our people strategy. So we have a roadmap potentially for the next 3 to 5 years. What are our key goals and metrics that we're trying to achieve? However, rarely have we seen a system strategy that's also created to align with your HR strategy. So that's one thing that we would recommend is for some audience members to consider having a system strategy for your Dayforce that aligns with some of your achievements in your people strategy. Does the system platform support you in achieving that strategy? So an example I'll bring forward would be some organizations when you're implementing phase 1, maybe you're not ready or you don't have a robust performance management program internally, and that's not something that the team has the bandwidth at the time to also implement a new system and look at relaunching and overhauling your internal performance management process. So if this is a people strategy goal, how can you utilize Dayforce, potentially the performance management module, to then tie into this type of goal that you're hoping to achieve within the next, say, 1 or 2 years? Another example could be your compensation rewards. Some organizations have a very detailed reward philosophy, or similar as they call it. However, if there is a chance for you to then revisit that and look at potentially the Dayforce compensation module to see how this can then enhance your usage of a system like Dayforce. So don't forget that if you have an HR strategy in place, consider also putting together something when it comes to a system strategy as well. One thing we would recommend for your system strategy is to create an annual calendar where you can outline maybe every quarter or potentially every month the system releases that we mentioned, so the cadence of every other quarter. We've also seen organizations be really successful if they plan out kind of drip feeding new updates or releases and planning this out ahead of time. So potentially in Q1 of 2026, we'll be launching a performance reviews through Dayforce. And then maybe in Q2, potentially we'll just do a refresher on company policies and ask everyone to sign off on their HR policies through the system, just as an example. So this is something that's also very helpful just to provide a bit more of focus when it comes to your wider teams, not just for HR, systems teams, it could be for payroll related as well, or overall company communications to your employees. This is something that we've seen be utilized highly effectively. And one last thing I did want to mention would be to utilize the Dayforce training portal to learn more about other modules or features that you may be considering. even if you don't currently have those enabled. So some of these screenshots and the different bite-sized videos in the Dayforce training portal could be used in your business case if you like to bring forward to your internal stakeholders, a business case to then launch, 3 talent modules through Dayforce. And some of the valuable resources that we mentioned earlier through the Dayforce community portal and the knowledge articles, plus the Dayforce training portal, will give you a really good understanding of what the features for those modules are, which would then allow you to create a more effective business case to bring forward to your stakeholders. One thing, Will, I just wanted to ask you, you had mentioned yesterday that there was another client that you were working with that recently launched Dayforce Wallet that they previously hadn't gone live with during initial implementation. So share with us what type of impact they saw after releasing Dayforce Wallet to their employees.
Yeah, I think tying in with the topic of long-term best practices, particularly if you've been live with Dayforce for a while, the product is constantly evolving and developing and new features are being added. So I think you mentioned about looking at the training and materials available for those, and is there a business case to add those? And I felt Wallet was one that was particularly worth mentioning. I've worked with some US-based organizations where Wallet is perhaps a bit more embedded. It's a bit newer to the EMEA market, but it does seem to be a bit of a game changer in the industry. For those who aren't familiar, Wallet is essentially earned wage access. So if you have, say, bi-weekly or monthly paid employees, this is allowing them to access typically a portion of their earned wage earlier than your standard pay dates in the organisation. It's all handled and dealt with in terms of tax changes and calculations within the Dayforce platform. So there's nothing external, additional that organisations have to do to use it. And Dayforce also essentially subsidise the early wage and then deducts that from your payroll at the end of the month. So there's no financial impact to the business as well. But the reason I bring this up is I've spoken to several clients that have recently gone live with Wallet, and this is a new feature in Dayforce that perhaps not everyone is familiar with, that can have a huge impact. I spoke to a care organisation who, for example, what they decided to do was they didn't allow earned wage access for their salaries, but they did it for overtime. So if you imagine their monthly paid organisation, they were offering overtime, but you're going to have to wait 3 or 4 weeks to access that, for example. They made the overtime 100% available 24 hours after the work shift. So say you do an overtime shift on the 3rd of April, but your pay is on the 28th of April. Typically, you wait those 3-4 weeks to get that. How they were then doing it is you can use your mobile app, go onto Wallet and withdraw that money the next day. They had an 85% reduction in agency spend, so they didn't have to go out and use agencies to backfill shifts because everyone was doing the overtime. Because, in my mind, if I can work today and tomorrow, Friday evening, I can take that money, put it in my bank account. I mean, I'd certainly be much more likely to pick up an overtime shift. Others were, I think there's a misconception that you either don't use it or you allow them to access 100% of their salary, for example, which again isn't the case. The employer controls the percentages. So it might be that you allow them to access 5 or 10% of their salary early. But if that saves them taking what we'd call bad debt, so payday loan, high interest credit card, and that, they've got flat tire, washing machine breaks, those classic examples. So yeah, we could probably do a whole separate session on Wallet. I won't go on too much more, but I wanted to highlight Wallet because I felt it was a good example of, for many people listening, Wallet probably didn't exist when you went live with Dayforce, but this is the type of functionality. I know there's a Lumi for learning, for example. So yeah, I would certainly keep your finger on the pulse in terms of things that you could be adding to your Dayforce platform. And then I think just to add the last couple of bits to add to Vicky's points, for me, I think having that tech strategy and not just a people strategy is such a great idea. Dayforce, because of its functionality, often attracts complex, growing global organizations. And say 5 years from go live probably look very different to how they did when they first went live with Dayforce. And it is that cliche, and I think I said this phrase on the first one, so I apologise, but it is never stop implementing. It's not a one and done, and I think you need to consider how business change, your people strategy and your business strategy, the knock-on impact that is ultimately and almost always going to have on your tech strategy as well. And I think just lastly on this point of best practice, we've spoken a lot over the last two sessions about learning materials and strategies that we would suggest implementing, and we see that the most successful clients use. But we appreciate that you've got your day jobs, and one of the main things that Vicky and I hear when we're talking to organizations that Silver Cloud support is that they do just have a lack of knowledge or capacity to execute some of these things. So there is a network out there. Silver Cloud, we don't just implement Dayforce, but we provide optimization and managed services. So people come to Vicky and I with a to-do list of 10 things and say, we know what the issues are, but it's working through these 10 things. We've all got our jobs, we're all at capacity with our day-to-day roles in the business, and we need that support. Others come to us and say, we feel we can optimize the platform and there's more we could be doing, but we're just not really sure what that is. And I think as much as there is some fantastic learning materials out there, you don't know what you don't know. And if you do need support in terms of deciphering where perhaps you're not getting the most out of the platform or you can use it even better, there's Silver Cloud to the rescue, I suppose you could say. That's the sort of thing that we certainly we can support with. And Vicky and I are always happy, just half an hour best practice chat. You can reach out to us and just say, I'm having an issue with this. I've seen your webinar, whatever it may be. Reach out to us, no problems at all. We'd happy to have a chat with you. So that's 5 of 5 for today. We've ticked off the top 10. If there are any questions anyone's got, there is the chat, the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to pop those in there. I'll give it a moment to see if anyone had any last questions. No, covered everything. Great. I'll give it another moment. I'll keep checking it as I'm talking. But I think just to say, naturally, if after you've watched this back, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Vicky and myself. You'll be sent a recording of this session and we'll ensure our contact details are included in that. So you're more than welcome just to pop us an email, message us on LinkedIn, whatever you prefer. I think from me, I just thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you if you joined the first session as well. I really hope you found this top 10 useful. As I say, you'll be sent the recording. It's also available on our website. We also have a breakdown of the further Hello Helpdesks, case studies, white pages, etc. that I mentioned that are all available on our website as well. Vicky, I'll hand over to you for any last thoughts or comments.
Yes, I think the main key takeaways is never stop implementing, as you say, Will. That's kind of our catchphrase when it comes to a system like Dayforce. But I did want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We did hope you found parts of this useful, and we look forward to seeing you in our future Hello Helpdesk sessions as well. I believe we're planning one for late May, early June, but look out for the official announcement in the coming weeks. And we hope you're able to join us for that session as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Take care.